In October of last year, the History Channel came down to New Orleans and invited most of the nonprofits and preservationist organizations to present proposals to them for funding on subjects that would preserve something about the culture of the city of New Orleans that we thought was important. But then as I started thinking about it, everything in New Orleans has to do with food. If you have Jazz Fest, it's food. If you have St. Joseph's Day Parade, there's food. So everything's associated with food. People talk about food. What did you have last night? What did you cook last night? How did you make that? There's hardly any subject you can say that doesn't have a connection to food in New Orleans. So it's always on people's mind. And so I thought, well, you know, if we ever lost this, it'd be a pretty boring city, you know. And so that's how I came up with the idea of presenting a project to the History Channel that would help preserve Creole cookery. Everything that is produced in this project will be preserved for future generations in the archives of the Historic New Orleans Collections Research Center. We also have wonderful collections of materials that have to do with the culinary history of New Orleans, from photographs of old restaurants to menus to manuscript cookbooks. We have the oldest cookbook ever produced on Creole cookery in our archives, so it was a very logical project for us.
Grew up in a small town across the lake called Madisonville. I'm the top of the line of 11 living children. My mother had 14, and she raised 11 of us, so everybody had their turn in the kitchen. My childhood was rough. Depression, rough. You eat everything they put in front of you because you're hungry, you want to eat that. I graduated from high school when I was only 16 years old. I went to work as a waitress, had never seen the inside of a restaurant before, didn't know one thing about what I was going to do, but I was willing to take the chance. And the ad I answered was funny as can be. Light-skinned colored girl, wanted. So the lady hired me anyway as a waitress. It was called the Colonial Restaurant. It was the first restaurant I went to. It was on Charters in St. Peter, around 500 block of Charter Street. So we said to her, Mrs. Savard, we should have a hot lunch every day. So she said, well, okay, if you can make this hot lunch and make it work, you can do it. First recipe we came up with the funniest thing, Creole wieners and spaghetti. Well, we didn't know anything else. That was depression. We didn't know. That's what we ate at home. So we had Creole wieners and spaghetti for 60 cents.
Because this is a book that goes back to 1975. And it's probably one of the first books to ever be written about the black chefs, the African American chefs in New Orleans. It's called Creole Feast. And in it is Mrs. Chase. And it was about 15 master chefs from New Orleans. What do you call the dishes that you cook? Do you call it country? Do you call it Creole? Do you call it what?
It is really Creole. We do Creole, but we have a lot of African influence in our Creole cooking. We use a lot of okra, we use a lot of brown gravies, we use paprika a lot, fresh herbs a lot, and we do it a totally different way. Now you will go to Commander's Palace. They say, I'm Creole, we're Creole. And they are. But they're going to give you that combination of Spanish and French, but I'm going to give you a Creole that has another mixture, African.
One of the things that I talk about when I talk about African influence is the use of leafy greens. And the whole idea of the use of leafy greens that you see throughout wherever Africans have been, from the continent itself to Brazil to the Caribbean. And I always say New Orleans is the northernmost point in the Caribbean because it's not really the south where you'll get your collards or your turnips or your mustards. But here you get, once a year, on Holy Thursday with me sitting at the table, gumbo zale. And so what we have here to prepare for you is a little bit of gumbo zale.
I'm trying to follow Mrs. Chase's instructions exactly.
All
so
right.
What we've done is we've steamed some of the meats in a little bit of water, but the chorizo sausage, which is a fresh sausage, we fried up in the pan, we reserve the oil, and now we're going to do that most important thing that we always have to do if we're cooking in New Orleans. We're going to make a roux. We've got that oil hot, and we're going to add just a little flour to it, and we're going to start to stir. And we're going to add some seasonings. We're going to add some thyme. So we're going to sprinkle in a little thyme.
You always want to put cayenne pepper.
That's enough. A little salt.
Salt.
Nice to the flavors.
After you have cooked it, after the greens are cooked good, you want to put filet in it. The filet is going to give it an extra flavor and a little smoother thing, a little thickener in there. Filet is ground sassafras leaves. I think we got that from our Indian side.
If I don't go on to be a scientist, I'm gonna be a cook.
All right. You come up with a way of taking my gumbo to the moon. I like that.